Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Italian authorities arrest 3 individuals following the tragic cable car crash in the Alps on Sunday. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Antony Blinken concludes his visit with Israel and the PA, heading off this morning for Cairo. And finally, ILTV takes another look into the rise of anti-Semitic hatred online, which may actually be spreading more and more by the hands of bots and puppeted accounts. Relatively good news and tragically bad news in the latest updates on a cable car crash in Italy that left 14 dead and a 5-year-old Israeli boy essentially orphaned on Sunday. The good news being that little Eitan Biran's medical condition is improving. Biran is the sole survivor of the crash, and doctors in Castelli Hospital are saying that they're slowly lifting him out of an induced coma with a team of psychologists on hand for the moment that he wakes. The bad news is that the terrible incident could likely have been completely avoided to begin with. As of now, 3 individuals have been arrested overnight Tuesday in connection to the crash that killed 14 people, including 5 members of Biran's family: Eitan's 2-year-old brother Tom, parents Tal and Amit, and great-grandparents Itzhak and Barbara Cohen. As for the detainees, they're including the manager of the cable car, its engineer, and the director of the service for allegedly, quote, conscious actions that led to the disaster. Specifically, they face charges of manslaughter, unintentional disaster, and removal of instruments intended to prevent injury by disaster. Lead public prosecutor Olympia Bossi saying that the safety brakes were tampered with in order to expedite the cable car's return to service, and that human error is also being investigated, especially after the same tram got stuck the day before, necessitating a technician's support, though it's not yet clear if the 2 incidents are at all connected. In any case, meantime, officials worldwide are offering their support for investigations for Eitan and for the other victims' families.
Il governo, ma tutte le istituzioni sono impegnate naturalmente nel capire le cause, nel comprendere cosa è accaduto, ma sono anche impegnate nella vicinanza alle famiglie di chi ha perso la vita, in particolare di questo bambino che, come sapete, è ricoverato all'ospedale di Torino e che è stato operato in prognosi riservata e che è stato già raggiunto da uno dei familiari in maniera tale da assicurare una qualche assistenza. Ecco, l'assistenza ai familiari in questo momento è un elemento cruciale.
Prime Minister Netanyahu likewise extending the State of Israel's full assistance for the Biran family in anything and everything they need. United States Secretary of State Blinken finishing his diplomatic meetings in Israel and heading to Egypt and Jordan Wednesday as he continues on to the second leg of his Middle East tour. Departing from Jerusalem to Cairo, the United States Secretary of State moving forwards with his Middle East mission on behalf of the Biden administration to create the grounds for 2-state negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, and the path to do so being through supporting and rebuilding the hard-hit Gaza Strip while ensuring Israel's right to safety and sovereignty, and propping up the PA over the terror group Hamas with the help of regional actors. To that end, after finishing consultations with Israeli and Palestinian leaders, Blinken announcing the restoration of ties with the Palestinians through the reopening of the United States Consulate General in Jerusalem. Additionally, Blinken says that President Biden will request an increase in financial aid for the sake of development and rebuilding efforts.
This relief is urgent. We have to respond to the profound need to help people in this moment. To that end, I informed President Abbas and earlier Prime Minister Netanyahu that the United States will notify Congress of our intention to provide $75 million in additional development and economic assistance for the Palestinians in 2021. We'll also provide $5.5 million in immediate disaster assistance for Gaza and a little over $32 million for UNRWA's emergency humanitarian appeal. This new assistance comes on top of significant support that the United States has recently committed and resumed to the Palestinian Authority, to Palestinians, different agencies and groups.
As for keeping aid out of the hands of Hamas, Blinken arguing that the reconstruction efforts would undermine the Gaza-based terror group.
Look, if we do this right, reconstruction and then and relief for the people of Gaza, far from empowering Hamas, I think has the potential to undermine it. I say that because Hamas thrives, unfortunately, on despair, on misery, on desperation, on a lack of opportunity. Our goal is to give the Palestinian people, including those in Gaza, a renewed sense of confidence, of optimism, of real opportunity. In my judgment, at least, if we're able to do that altogether, then Hamas's foothold in Gaza will slip, and we know that, and I think that Hamas knows that.
Likewise, as Blinken is leaving, UK Foreign Minister Dominic Raab arriving for similar meetings with Israeli and Palestinian officials and carrying the same missions as Washington.
Look, Hamas is a terrorist organisation. We affirm Israel's right to self-defence, of course. At the same time, we need to try and create the conditions so that Palestinians can enjoy a better standard of life. We can get humanitarian aid in. We've already provided an emergency package of £3 million to provide humanitarian relief. We need to get that to where it's needed. Palestinian civilians in Gaza, on the West Bank, and I think raising the standards of living, providing at least some stability for Palestinians is the best way to marginalise the extremists and find a track towards that two-state solution.
No clear details as to how aid will actually be kept from Hamas, however, have been outlined. And at least for the time being, Hamas still a major player in negotiations with Israel and the West as it maintains an iron grip over the Gaza Strip. Hamas terror leader Ismail Haniyeh just announcing his own invitation from Cairo to negotiate ceasefires and other agreements through the Egyptian authorities. This is the first time Haniyeh has been invited to Egypt since fleeing from Gaza to Qatar. Here now with additional insights into the prospects of future peace in the Middle East, senior researcher at the International Institute for Counterterrorism at the IDC Herzliya, Dr. Michael Barak. Dr. Barak, thank you so much. First off, Secretary of State Blinken, UK Foreign Minister Raab, Israel Defense Minister Gantz, and Prime Minister Netanyahu, and many others are working to uphold the ceasefire while uplifting the Palestinian Authority and isolating Hamas. What do you think of this course of action, theoretically and practically speaking?
Look, it's very difficult to implement this scenario or vision to prevent Hamas to become stronger. Egypt, for example, promised to reconstruct Gaza by investing $500 million in construction. Now, not giving money like Qatar is doing, and this is one way to prevent Hamas to get stronger. I think it's very difficult to implement that. Hamas will not. There are discussions about the militarization of Gaza Strip. It's very difficult to implement.
Okay, well, so more about that, actually, the militarization, as you said, of the Gaza Strip. Oftentimes, Hamas is elevated publicly, especially to the likes of a diplomatic or otherwise legitimate actor. Just a few days ago, actually, Sky News sat down with Hamas co-founder Mahmoud Zaha as if he were just another official who happens to be Palestinian. But at the same time, Hamas is recognized by the United States, Canada, EU, UK, and more as a terrorist entity. In Jordan, where 80% identify as Palestinian, the organization is banned entirely. So what exactly is the difference between Hamas and ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Boko Haram, Taliban, etc.?
First of all, Hamas is, there is no difference between Hamas and ISIS. Both of them launch missiles on civilians. So Hamas is only try to portray the conflict with Israel as a national one. This is not a national conflict. It's a religious conflict. And Ismail Haniyeh, Khaled Mashal, and also other leaders in Hamas stressed that this is a conflict on Al-Aqsa. Hamas is exploiting this sensitive place of the Al-Aqsa in order to incite people to have collisions with Israelis. In social media networks, Hamas in the West Bank, in Gaza, calls to its people to stab people, innocent people. So there is no difference between ISIS and Hamas.
So why aren't meetings with Hamas contextualized as being akin to meeting with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi or Osama bin Laden?
Okay, good question. So first of all, Egypt, first of all, Hamas is part of the Palestinian society. And this is a fact that no one can ignore. And because the situation is so too complicated, it's not a reality of black or white. Hamas is as in two branches. One is the military one, is Adin al-Qassam brigades, and the other branch is political one. And this branch is as to rule on about 2 million people in Gaza. So the situation, what is the difference between ISIS to Hamas? That Hamas is controlling on this civilian society and having legitimacy from states like Qatar, Turkey, while ISIS is not having such a legitimacy. This is a very complicated situation. And I cannot elaborate now the discussion, in 2 minutes. It's not black or white. And Hamas have also allies in the West, like the Muslim Brothers, BDS, left radical wing in the West that are trying to portray Hamas as a legitimate actor in the Palestinian arena who fighting against imperialism. So this is a very complicated situation.
All right, Dr. Michael Barak, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, shortly before jetting off to Cairo for the second leg of his Middle East tour, United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken extending an invitation from Washington to Israeli President Rivlin for a visit before his term comes to a close. Rivlin, whose term as president is set to end in July, saying that he's happy to accept the invitation, which would make him the first senior Israeli official to meet with President Biden in the White House. Meantime, Blinken and Rivlin also discussing the alliance between Israel and the United States, with the secretary reaffirming the White House's commitment to Israel's security. Rivlin, for his part, agreeing that Israel has no better friend than the United States and vice versa, though also lamenting it as inconceivable that Hamas is not recognized worldwide as a terrorist war criminal enterprise. And this on the backdrop of seemingly fading support amongst American progressives.
The bipartisan could be expressed also from time to time from the ability of both of us not to agree. And friendship means to agree, not to agree.
Now, speaking of online influence and the so-called cancel culture, the latest victim being the director of UNRWA's Gaza branch, Matthias Schmale, receiving a torrent of condemnations and calls for resignation after commenting in an interview that Israel's recent airstrikes in the Gaza Strip appeared to be precise and sophisticated, nearly completely avoiding, with few exceptions, all civilian targets. He also denied that there are any shortages of food, medicine, or water, as Israel has reopened all of the crossings. But under pressure by Hamas terrorists and anti-Israel activists, Schmale has recanted and apologized. My next guest, on the other hand, works daily to counter the waves of online misinformation and anti-Israel propaganda. Israel human rights activist Hanania Naftali. Hanania, it's an honor to have you here. Thank you so much.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
So it's been reported that bots, so-called sock puppets, and foreign actors are paying to promote real but otherwise unseen content on social media, and that is mostly to blame for the online discourse, or the heightened online discourse that's going on right now. How much do you see online that is coming from legitimate critics as opposed to echo chambers of divisive or even fake accounts?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great question. And I can tell you that during the recent operation, we have seen a lot of bots, a lot of illegal activity actually on social media, people who are trying to, bots, who are trying to, change people's opinions illegally. During this operation, I have seen a lot of Palestinian activists who are always commenting immediately right after I would post something. They would immediately posts comments bashing Israel, comments with the flag of Palestine or something like that, trying to show people that this is the majority and we are the minority. But I think that what we should remember is that there are millions of people around the world who are tremendous supporters of Israel and who are supporting Israel on social media, offline as well. And I think that that's something that we should not forget, because these bots, these technological tools are obviously trying to change our opinion.
You yourself actually, especially during the last conflict, have seen an explosion in your viewership, in your subscribership and people seeing your content. Have you have you seemingly changed any minds, or are you preaching to the choir, so to speak?
Well, that's something that I always think about because I make videos on social media and with the intention to change people's opinions. My target audience is not those that, hate Israel so deeply because, you will not be able to change their opinion. What I'm trying to reach on social media is those that are thinking, that have doubts. And, well, I received many interesting messages and comments. And, obviously you see millions of, big numbers, but what I really want to know is if I'm making a difference. And I can tell you that I received a lot of messages from, Jews, Christians, Muslims. An example, I got a message from an Arab from the United Arab Emirates who told me, in private that, well, thank you for speaking out. Thank you for sharing the truth because I did not know that, that it's actually the Palestinian rioters who are throwing rocks and fireworks at the Israeli police and then run to hide inside Al-Aqsa Mosque. I thought that it's the Israeli police just, willingly breaking into the mosque. So I think that there's deep value in that. And I also receive messages from Jews around the world. Nowadays we see a worrying spike in anti-Semitism, and I receive messages from Jews that, I remember this message in particular. A Jew from France was telling me that, I was scared to wear a necklace, with the Magen David, the Star of David. And, well, seeing that there is so many supporters, so many friends of Israel, it gave me the courage.
I know that there are a lot of people, the average pro-Israel supporter, or even just a Jew, trying to combat some of the anti-Semitism, the waves of anti-Semitism that they're seeing online, especially right now. What kind of advice might you give them who feel browbeaten into just maybe not responding at all?
Right, to the Jews.
To anyone, yeah. Pro-Israel, Jewish, who
right.
may or may not be pro-Israel, but is receiving anti-Semitic hate, all sorts, yeah.
Let me tell you this. Nowadays, we are seeing this spike in anti-Semitism. I'm an Israeli Jew. I was born and raised here. And it terrifies me to see this rise in anti-Semitism. When I traveled to Germany, I saw security outside of a synagogue. I didn't see the same security outside of a church or a mosque. The question is why? We have seen movements against Asian hate, against hate towards the black community. Where are they now? This is the same hatred, except that the anti-Semitism is way more ancient. We have been experiencing this for centuries. Where are they now? We need people to know the truth and to stand up for us, because throughout history, no one stood, no country stood to defend Israel, to defend the Jews. So now that we have a state of our own, the Jewish state, we have every right to defend ourselves by ourselves. And my advice to pro-Israel activists, to Jews, is to be proud of who you are. We have nothing to be ashamed of. We are not committing crimes against humanity. We're not committing war crimes. We're not like them, like the anti-Semites, like Hamas that seeks our destruction. It is the anti-Semites that should be afraid, not the Jews.
All right, Hanania, Naftali, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now in lighter news, prospective homeowners are debating on what's best: betting your cards on an already existing property or one that for now exists only on paper. Well, there are many considerations to take into account when making this type of life-changing decision. And here to discuss some of these points in our first of a series of segments is Regional Sales Manager at Nefusi Real Estate Group, Vered Kopliko. Vered, thanks so much for coming back.
Thank you for inviting me again. It's
our pleasure. All right, so it's assumed that you're not looking for an apartment ready for immediate living. What are some critical differences between buying a ready apartment versus one that will only be built and ready for living in a couple of years?
First of all, I have to put an exception. If someone from our client, because we have, a lot of record, we deal with a lot of foreigners that live Jewish communities outside international and everything. If someone wants to immediately somewhere to live, That's his demand. Okay, we follow our customer. That's what we're here for. But there's a huge difference, okay, between taking your money and putting it in a home that already exists, and then generally you have to deal with it, okay? You have to suit your own demands to the home that exists already. Usually you cannot get what you always want, and you have to do the additional preparation and everything. And to do it from a long distance, it's almost impossible. And you cannot manage professionals, okay, when you're not here. You have to rely on someone that you really, really trust to deal it for you, and we think it's not the best option. We usually recommend to buy on the paper something that is not ready, okay? And you have a lot of advantages here. I think the most critical point is liability, okay? Because you have guarantee that someone is responsible for the product that you bought for a long distance. That's the law in Israel.
All right, well, so in Israel, speaking of the law, we have several different government plans that are issued for renovation and reinforcing old buildings, such as Tama 38. What are the differences, and what's maybe more preferable?
More preferable is a brand new product, okay? Not something that was built on something. If you're looking on Tama 38/2 is a really good plan, because you ruin the old house that was on the ground and build a brand new one, okay? But Tama 38/1 is something that you have inspect very carefully.
They renovate an existing building.
Renovating on old facilities, okay? You have to take under consideration a lot of complication on the way, and you have to have a good advisor that will tell you exactly what to do and will sit near the building every day to inspect it, okay? Otherwise, it's a little bit risky. The key term here is to have a good advisor, someone that has a good record and did it for a lot of customer, and just take them hand by hand through the target.
All right, so let's move on to maybe some of the trends that you've been seeing in terms of new projects and government policy, and how those trends affect real estate prices.
The general trend, actually, we predict a lack of new homes, new plans, okay, starting even the next new year, next January, February, and because all the plans that we used to know are changing all the time. There's immediate lack every year. And
there's a housing crisis.
It will not, I cannot see a smart solution very soon, because we have to have good authorities that will deal in a national aspect, okay, not in the high demands areas, in a national aspect, to give good plans and to, build good homes. Meanwhile, in the next year or so, we think it will be very delayed, all these plans.
Sounds like the low supply, high demand, very expensive housing.
Classic one, yeah. And this will, push to a very high prices. So every day that passing by is a waste of time.
So get in while you can.
While you can. We are here.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
All right, and now let's take a look at the weather forecast with Chana Rivlin.
Good afternoon to our viewers. Now, more clear skies expected tonight and Thursday, with lows staying stagnant in the 60s Fahrenheit or the upper teens in Celsius. Then tomorrow, temperature highs still reaching the 80s and 90s or the upper 30s in Celsius, depending where you are in the country.
All right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.25 shekels to the American dollar and 2.69 shekels to the Canadian dollar. Finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as to our newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Aaron Porras. Be well. Thank you so much for watching.